Hi, welcome to the Derek Show, and just this episode, I want to talk about the Creality Spider Hotend, which I've been using in my experiences with it recently. Anyway, as you can see here, I'm still on Micro Swiss all metal hotend, which is actually very good. I wanted to keep it. It's just that I made a mistake in maintaining it. I didn't screw in the hotend properly into the heat break, and so I caused a clog there, a leak that clogged the hot end and ruined it, which is a huge waste of money. But that was my fault, not Micro Swiss. So because of that, I decided I got to replace this hot end so I can print. But I wanted to try out the new Creality Spider hot end, and I'll explain why soon. But I decided, use this as the opportunity for that. So the key thing that attracted me to Creality Spider hot end was, as you see in this ad, the flow speed. So at 200 and something millimeters per second, that would be a real help for big prints. So that attracted me. But I later found out that, well, it's basically depends on your printer. Your printer's motors have to be able to support it. So just FYI. So now that I removed that heat break from the Micro Swiss hot end, I'm now gonna need to remove the fans from the fan enclosure because they need a bigger enclosure for a Creality Spider hot end. So that's what I'm doing. I'm unscrewing that first fan, which I believe is used to cool my heat break. So once the fan is unscrewed, just pull it out of the shroud. Very easy, no trick here. So now I have to unscrew the other fan, the one that cools my hot end and parts. As you can see, this is a little bit trickier, and with the small wrench, it's not easy. Now I just want to share that even though you've unscrewed this last fan here, there's a little cap on top of it that has to be taken off first before you can pull the fan out. Okay, remember this. So here what I'm doing is I'm locating the correct screws that came with the Creality hot end to figure out which one goes into the spider's heat break. So I found them and I put them in the heat break first because I find it's easier to attach the heat break to that back plate when the screw's already in there. So then I just have to hold them against and then uh, just can use my fingers even to screw them in a little bit first to hold the heat break in place and then tighten them with the wrench later. So with the screws already in the heat break, I just line it up to the screw holes at the back plate there and then screw the heat break in. So now I've attached my whole Spider hot end to my Ender 5 Pro printer. So now the next thing is I decide to put in the Creality supply thermistor for this hot end. It takes a special thermistor. It doesn't take the regular one, so you have to use the one included with the hot end kit. So the next thing I did was place in the heater cartridge, as you can see. So as with the thermistor, I'm going to use my finger here to prevent the heater cartridge from being pushed out the other hole, right? Because you can slide through if you're not careful. So now with the thermistor and heater cartridge in place, I just use some small screws to tighten the hot end to keep them in place. Okay, so I want to attach the fan shroud now. So first thing is put the fans into the fan shroud. They just slide in. They don't have to be screwed. Okay, but it's important to do that first. This part I found very challenging. That is actually installing the fan shroud. So if you look at the top, you notice that the hole there only allows the PTFE tubing to go through. It doesn't actually fit easily on top. So you have to put the tube, your PTFE tube, through that hole first, put it through into your heat break, seal into your heat break by putting in that. You don't have to seal it into heat break, but you have to push it all the way down into the heat break, and then you slide, let the fan shroud slide down the PTFE tubing to rest on top. So here's another view. Here first I put the sock, and then again I show you the sliding down the fan shroud so you can see how it goes. You're looking down, like sliding it down the PTFE tubing. Now, it's important to note the Creality Spider all metal hot end is actually bigger than the previous hot end it had, or like the Micro Swiss in my case. So I had to use that screw at the back of the print bed to basically lower it a bit so that when I do, the bed leveling and stuff, the bed doesn't just, the print bed doesn't just ram into the nozzle. So again, I'm going to do another one of my best practices, and that is wrapping up the wires like around the PTFE tubing with the sock. As you can see here, it just makes things neater and avoids cases where where you have a thermistor wire get caught in the filament when it's unspooling for printing. And again, since it's a new hot end, I did my PID auto tuning. And as always, another one of my best practices, I take those PID tuning settings, put them into the firmware, and rebuild, right? Just be careful. Make sure you get the latest release of the firmware. I'm using the nightly builds. That's the best. I made a mistake and tried to build it, put it into an older firmware, like a stable release, and then it just wouldn't flash onto the printer and wasted some time. So I just stick with the nightly builds. And as usual, I'm going to prove to you that I got the new firmware, my new Marlin firmware, onto my printer by showing you the boot up process where it's flashing the firmware, and you'll see the date when I built the firmware. So the date's important. Always make sure you change it when you're building your firmware so you know you got it flashed. So now that everything's ready, now it's time to level a bed, which is very important since the z-axis is shortened because the spider hot end is bigger. So this is absolutely the most important step. So I made sure to level the bed correctly. So now that everything's set and the bed is leveled, is now for the first most important test, printing a benchy. So I'm just printing a regular benchy, regular settings, nothing, not trying anything out yet. So I don't show it in this video, but essentially when the printing was done, it was a very decent benchy. I was very happy with no problem with the arches, because those are really the challenging parts, right? Like where there's overhang and no support. So it came out very well, and I was happy with that. And I was encouraged now to try, like that originally Creality ad said about the higher printing speeds. So with the normal benchy printing fine, I got more confident and decided to print at 80 millimeters per second. So you can see me setting on the slicer there. I'll show you my result after a bit. So since I print after I printed at that benchy at what I thought was 80 millimeters per second, I was pretty impressed with what I saw, and I'll show you soon enough. I decided to try at the advertised speed of 240 millimeters. I put that in the slicer, that speed, and it gave me some problems. I didn't understand why, but I'll explain later once I show the benchies. So if you look here, these are the two benchies I printed, one at 80 millimeters per second and the other at a higher speed, which I thought was 240 millimeters per second. At least that's what I put in the slicer. And I labeled them so you can see. And I'm just going to show you them, the different sides and angles and the arches specifically, so you can see the quality. It's roughly the same, and it's pretty good. So I'm happy with what I have so far. Now, as you can see from the bench that's been printed onto the bench pulled up again as the nozzle passes over it. So I think part of it's because I got my bed leveling now properly done, but also I think the spider hot end is very good quality. I've been printing a lot, and I've left with some examples here so you can see some other prints I started, and everything came out pretty good. So I'm quite happy with it. I want to point out also that I'm primarily stuck on PETG filaments. So when you look at those benchies, they're printed in PETG, and that's why you can see the stringiness effect. Right? Uh, that's just PETG for you. The other thing is, I also print with a bed temperature of 85 degrees Celsius. I find that keeps the filament on the print bed longer. So that's all I have to say. Last thing is that the print speed. I thought I was printing at 240 millimeters per second, but the slicer shows an error, like it colors it red. And so when I talked with Creality, they said, well, because of the print speed is actually limited by my printer. So my motors can go up to a maximum of something like I don't know, maybe 60 millimeters per second for good quality, but I've been printing at 80 or sometimes even 100. So it's good to have a faster nozzle, right? And but it's not as fast as it can. Depending on the printer, it cannot go as fast as what the advertisement says, and that's all I wanted to say before I end this video. But all in all, I'm happy with the quality of this hot end, and so far it hasn't caused me any problems since. So I'm very happy with that. So thanks for watching this episode of the Derek Show, and I hope this helps you with your 3D printing. Goodbye.